Well, welcome everybody to the May 20th Ag Talk Tuesday. We're excited to hear about how the spring's shaped up, what the crop updates are. We've got a number of different industries represented here, so we should have a good round of crop updates. We'll follow that by our scheduled presentation from Dr. Erin Brooks, who's with the Department of Soil Water Systems at the University of Idaho. Is that the correct home? Okay. Dr. Brooks has graciously accepted an invitation to talk about some do-it-yourself freely available tools for making management decisions, evaluating on-farm actions that you may have taken. And we're excited to hear about that a little later in the program. As we typically do with Ag Talk Tuesday, we welcome everyone's participation today, and we'd like to start out with some crop updates or general announcements from your industry. We've got Pam Hutchinson ready to tell us about how potatoes have progressed in Southeast Idaho. That sounded like a great place to start. And she's got a few items that she'd like everyone to be aware of. I'll be dropping into the chat. So do be mindful that there'll be extra information in the chat periodically. And I want to thank our co-hosts, Juliet Marshall, Kasha Dulman, who can't be with us today, and our emeritus host, Pam, for being present on this call. Before we pivot over to the potato update, Juliet, I see your mic is off. Do you have anything burning that we need to address before we get going?
Yes, actually, I want to thank everybody for attending. I will not be able to stay, which is why I would ask Doug if he minds me starting with the cereals update. I have another meeting I have to rush to. It's been kind of a busy day, and I apologize to Pam right now for preempting a potato start and asking if it's okay that anybody minds that I start with the cereals and then log off and go to my next meeting.
I'll let you and Pam hash that out between you.
Pam,
No
is that
worries.
okay?
Yeah, no worries, Juliet. We'll save the best for last.
There you go. No problem with that. So, again, welcome everybody. I see an old friend, Don Morishita, had joined, so that's pretty exciting. Hi, Don. And I'm going to just start talking a little bit about cereals and see what's going on. If anybody has any additional input after I talk about what I've observed in the field. We've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is we've got some wonderful wet weather in Southeast Idaho and in Central Idaho. There's some donut holes, like Aberdeen always seems to be a donut hole, but the cool wet weather is really good for cereals. But we have had some very cold temperatures, which with the winter wheat and winter barley can mean some damage to the crop that's in the boot and just starting to emerge, depending upon the local temperatures. But overall, excellent weather growing conditions for cereals. A little bit low on the heat units, but with the forecast coming in, I'm pretty sure that we'll be jumping in crop growth stage here in the next week or so. What the cold temperatures do mean is wonderful opportunities for high yield and also wonderful opportunities for stripe rust. Haven't seen any. So good news is for us, California growing wheat acres is way down. We're only talking 50,000 acres. What that means for us is that our inoculum sources to our southwest is very low. And so for stripe rust to be coming in our normal route from the south to the north, the southwest to the northeast, in that normal flow of the winds, we should not see a lot of stripe rust. So that's good news. The bad news is that the conditions also are pretty favorable for bacterial problems to get started. And I have already seen some bacterial leaf streak in winter barley starting. That's not necessarily a good thing. And of course, there's nothing we can do to prevent that bacterial streak or stripe from spreading rapidly with the high winds, the cold temperatures, the sleet, and the hail, which causes damage to the leaf surface, and the bacteria spread very readily. So that's what we're looking for. Low stripe rust, higher maybe on the bacterial problems, overall good conditions. We have seen a little bit of viral problems, but not a lot. And that's just a little bit of barley yellow dwarf virus, the PAV strain, and a little bit of a wheat streak mosaic virus mixed in with the other conditions for the barley yellow dwarf. So overall, our crop growth stage, we're at heading of the winter crop in the Rupert to Kimberly area. As we move over towards the eastern part of the state, we're looking at a crop growth stage at about boot to head emergence. We're going to start taking heading notes soon on the winter wheat in this area. The spring wheat, of course, is still in early growth stages. I'd say Feeks 5. I do see Trent Stanger on board. Trent, have you been out in the field much? Do you have anything to add when it comes to the growth stage or any diseases that you're seeing in the field?
Hi, Julia. I have been out in the field some recently. I've seen about the same for growth stages. Still spring wheat. To my knowledge, hasn't gotten to the joint stage anywhere yet. But yes, I have seen some winter wheat in the boot stage, but no diseases thus far.
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah.
I see Brent Husey and Brett Despain. Anybody else want to add things of the northern conditions or other conditions that they've observed that I haven't? Well, Doug, you can add small grains on the northern side.
Yeah, we're a little further ahead. The lowest elevation fields around Lewiston are well headed out. As you get up into the 1,200 feet elevation, we're starting to see heading in the earliest varieties. And then you get up onto the Palouse, and it's still very much, 2 weeks behind that, where they were able to capitalize on the warmer than usual conditions we had this spring. And things are still, starting to get into the boot or a little further on there. So we've got a gradient, as we typically do with our erratic elevations here, but the way that this spring has played out, the warmth was enough to really move things along at the lowest elevations. Spring crop is just as you describe, unless somebody did a dormant seeding, which they can get away with in some of our canyons, some of our lowest areas, it's just emerged and, is 4 to 6 weeks into growth. We had good seeding conditions and allowed for a timely, somewhat early planting this year for the spring cereals. We have stripe rust being reported in susceptible variety testing plots, but as far as widespread, we just haven't seen it yet. We did just get some blessed rains across the whole region and some moderate cooling temperatures and blustery conditions. So be on the lookout. Xiaoming Chen suggests that if you have a known susceptible variety in commercial production, that you should be ready to spray it if necessary. And it's likely that we'll be seeing some inoculum blowing in from Oregon, which is our culprit source, typically, unless although he did note that there was rust overwintering in central Washington, so we may have some more local sources. However, so far, that is not a major issue with us. And of course, we could always just plant resistant varieties and take the temperature down quite a bit on that concern as well. So for cereals, I think we're in very good shape in North Idaho. We're just crossing our fingers and hoping we get that ½ inch to an inch of rain the first weeks of June that makes or breaks our crop every year.
Yeah. So we've actually had some unusual, it's almost like a monsoonal cold, but it's cold flow of rain. We had that warm just like you did, and now we're in this cold, blustery, windy, and sleety type. And that's the sleet what concerns me with potential damage, the bacterial streak going mad. But overall, we've had more rain, I think, than you guys have had up there. Very unusual conditions. Yeah.
Yeah. There's more D0, D1 drought conditions in our growing region than I believe that you have in yours. So
It's kind of weird. So I'll wrap that up. If anybody has any questions or adds to it, please do so for the cereals. And if not, I'll turn it back to Doug.
All right, thank you, Juliet. Let's pivot to potatoes.
Bye for now.
Yeah,
Pam, would you like to lead off?
sure, I can do that. As many of you know, I retired from university February 28th, but I'm still with the university as affiliate faculty, and you can still text and call and email me. I've already had some calls, of course, this spring, and I love coming out to the field and taking a look at things. Um, so I'll talk about, let's see, the weather. So temperature, rain, and a little bit about herbicide movement, herbicide injury, and then have some information on tank mixing. So Doug just sent out a file or two of the information I have on tank mixing, and I'll get to that here at the end. So thank you, Doug. So yes, temperature and rain. It's well, first of all, potatoes across the state. Over here in eastern Idaho, I've just been just now seeing this last week or so hilling, and then herbicide application, and then sprinkler incorporation. And so that seems to be going really well. Um, Other people can update us on what it's like over in the Treasure Valley area, and then South Central area as far as emergence and how herbicide applications are going. Temperature wise, and I know people jump in here about sugar beets, but over here we've had, I think it got down to 35 degrees the other day. So I'm wondering about sugar beets, if we've had any freezing, where they might have to replant some crops. Potatoes, you remember we had freezing temperatures last year in early June, and most of the potatoes recovered. There wasn't a long enough season where everything got back up and growing, and we really didn't see any yield loss or anything like that. So we'll have to see how late we have frost this year. But right now, we had the cold temperatures, and that was before potato emergence here. As far as the rain, yes, we've had nice rain. Some people have sprinkler incorporated or chemicated on their herbicides before the rain. And if you can remember in some past years where we got rain after incorporation, it might have been quote unquote too much for some herbicides, and they moved out of the weed seed germination zone. And two of those that could happen to are matrix and metribuzin and Spartan. Those three are highly soluble, and so they'll move, especially in our sandy soils. And so you might see some breaks, especially for, well, pretty much any break, but especially with those products for hairy nightshade and common lamb's quarters that metribuzin helps. Fortunately, Prowl and Linux, the other ones that you really need in your tank mix if you have a lot of common lamb's quarters, those are low solubility and they really don't move below that 2-inch weed seed germination zone. So you really shouldn't see any breaks if you've got those in the tank mix for common lamb's quarters. So that's something to think about. And if you do have breaks, and it is common lamb's quarter, it might be either metribuzin moving, or we do have metribuzin resistant redwood pigweed populations out here across the state. So think about that as well. I had interesting question, and so people can chime in here after I get done talking about tank mix, about how it's looking across the state as far as emergence and where herbicide application timing is coming. I had an interesting question last week about tank mixing, and a lot of things really kind of settling out or gooing up sprayers. And so I looked for some things because in the past I thought about, you put 50% of water in and start agitation really well. And especially for like glyphosate applications, you apply ammonium, put the ammonium sulfate in there first, and then put the glyphosate in there. But what I've posted, there's a really nice publication from Purdue called Avoiding Tank Mixing Errors. And there's a chart in there. There's a lot of information in there. So, but read through it. It's really good info. There's a chart in there that gives some information about the different orders of the different formulations to add, in what order. And the most important thing, again, is putting 50% of water in there first, starting agitation. And then after each addition, really, keep the agitation going, to make sure everything goes into solution. So you can take a look at that to see the right order. I also put a picture in there of one from Australia called WAMDIL. It starts out with wettable powders and agitation, and it goes from there with the M and DLE. So, very interesting question, and just talked about rain and freezing and herbicide movement, and possible breaks in weed control, plus some tank mixing information. And Doug posted in there also a new weed control resource from the University of Idaho. So any updates for what things look like across the state with potatoes, and any questions?
Anyone in the potato industry from Treasure Valley, from Magic Valley area? All
That's
right.
fine. If you can't think of anything, just put it in the chat here later. It'd be nice to know some updates, and if not, I can get some updates and post it online on the Ag Talk Tuesday website.
Thank you, Pam.
You're welcome.
So unfortunately, I lack the history and all of the personal relationships that Juliet Marshall, Kasha, and Pam bring to this. Is there anyone from the alfalfa industry or is raising alfalfa in Southern Idaho that can give us an idea of how things are going with that important crop? Right, not this morning. How about any of our specialty crops in Southwest Idaho? Onions, hops, mint. Uh, general comments on how things are going in that corner of the state. Oh, oil seeds. I know that in this section of the world, our winter canola, winter oilseed varieties are all in excellent bloom. And we've seen some fairly favorable conditions for that crop. Too early to say much about the spring canolas yet, but we have the conditions that should bring out the folks taking pictures and doing all the fun stuff to appreciate all of those acres of yellow. Ron Patterson says Eastern Idaho codling moths and apples. The first spray should be around May 30th in Pocatello. Ron, do you have anything else you want to say generally about codling moth while we got you?
Yeah, generally they're the cold weather the last couple weeks is actually going to decrease their viability, and so I don't expect this first generation of codling moth to be extreme, at least in this part of the state, extremely high. The second generation is usually the one where we get most of the damage, but yeah, the everything just kind of went on hold with this cold weather. So we, upper Snake River Valley is not we're not too concerned yet about the codling moth.
All right, thank you very much. So other crop updates. Anyone willing to share what's happening in your corner of the world? How about the crops that you're working with there at Aberdeen? What are you seeing?
We planted sugar beet this year. I think it was pretty cold, and then finally sugar beet germinated. And I think probably last week it was at the cold laden stage. So this week probably a little bit further. And
Any
then
damage from the recent cold conditions?
probably not, but just I think we planted the first week of May, I think. It was really cold day we planted. But after that, just the weather kind of back and forth, a little bit cold and then warm up, a little bit cold and warm up, just repeat it like this. It's a little bit weird this year, the weather condition.
And what's your expectation of how that might affect the development of your sugar beet trials there?
I don't know. I think this is my second time. The first time planted 10 years ago, and this is the second time I plant sugar beet. So I just don't usually work on sugar beet. But we also planted barley and pea intercropping, and then they germinate well because that field was planted a little bit earlier than the sugar beet.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for letting me call you out there, She.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. All right. Just before we pivot to Dr. Brooks, we've got a couple more comments. Pam just put in that Palmer amaranth and water hemp resistance are ongoing. Albert Ajesawar is our main contact trying to wrestle that bear. On the website link that I posted, it's important to note that besides some information about research and some research reports, there's a function where you can submit photos for weed identification. And if you suspect that you have water hemp or Palmer amaranth, a photo can be very helpful. So there's a functionality with this on this webpage where you can get that information fairly quickly. There's also a link for herbicide resistance screening for both southern and northern Idaho. We used to have a different, more clunkier method, but they've streamlined that down. So if you or, excuse me, any of your clients suspect you may have herbicide resistance playing a role in whatever fields you're managing, there should be instructions and a way to collect seed, contact the weed scientists, and find out exactly what you're wrestling with there. So just updates. They haven't found any water hemp or Palmer east of Rupert, which is good news, but folks are on the lookout. So if you'd like to see the progress of that, where we have found Palmer amaranth in southern Idaho, you can check out the Palmer Watch function on our PNWHRI website. I'll drop the link in the chat. And we have a real-time tracking map for all of the samples that we find positive. We're putting up on a heat map there. Okay, last chance for crop update comments. Hearing none, I think we should pivot to the presentation portion of the Ag Talk Tuesday. Dr. Brooks is going to be demoing some tools that we can all use and are freely available if you have internet connection to assist with management decision evaluation, what's going on the ground, utilizing some pretty cool technologies. Dr. Brooks, would you like to take it from there?
Sure. And I might even start off a little bit of kind of a poll, an informal poll. I want you guys to raise your hands if you guys have, you hear a lot of talk already about weather. Oh, it's been colder. Oh, it's been drier. No, it's been wetter here. No, it's been wetter here. So do you guys use Climate Toolbox? Have you heard, or maybe this is do you use Climate Toolbox to track weather anomalies? Anyone? Just raise your hand. Doug does. Cami does. Anybody else use Climate Toolbox? Has anybody heard of Climate Toolbox other than these three? She does. Good. Because, I could even do a whole talk on Climate Toolbox. So if you just say, hey, it's been cold for the last 7 days. Well, how cold? Has it been normal? Is it, how much colder than normal is it? Oh, the precip, it's been really, we're real wet in the last 7 days. Well, can we look at it? Can we map this? So Climate Toolbox is one that, you know, if anything you get out of this, that would be one I would explore. So you can type it into Google, go Climate Toolbox, go in and there's in the toolbox, there's I'll show you a few things and I'll break away and I'll demonstrate that. So that's a cool just weather ding. So the other thing is, has anybody used Climate Engine or any other satellite imagery products? I guess Climate Engine is a way to take satellite imagery. So have anybody used Climate Engine? Doug, Cami, of course. Okay, this is good because you're gonna learn something today. How about Cropscape? Has anybody used Cropscape or the Cropland data layer? Anyone? Okay, Colby's got that. Cool. So there are just, yeah, I guess this is what I kind of wanted to give a talk, is just kind of get you guys aware of what's out there. And some of these tools are really easy to use, and especially for you people looking at, oh, colder, wetter, how's it going across the state? Boy, if it's cold and wet, I know that's susceptible to rust. So you guys should have tools. And I suspect that you use, you know, Agromet or some other weather resources that are local. I'm sure you have your own indicators of what you want to track, but this is another tool that you could use. So let me share the screen and I'll go through this. This is something that Doug and I have been kind of talking about doing. This will give you the short version, and depending on you guys' interest and you wanted to continue to dive into these tools deeper, I'd be happy to go through and do a longer workshop on this if people are interested in what you see here.
We got your notes page. There you go.
Perfect. So yeah, I just kind of came up with this do-it-yourself online tools. I teach a precision ag class up here at the university, and my background is in really spatial hydrology and water quality. And so I'm really interested in spatial patterns and understanding spatial patterns. And you might know me as also recently giving a lot of talks across the state and part of the IAMP project. And the IAMP project, we were incentivizing growers to put in practices. And a part of that, if you'd heard some of the talks, is I wanted people to put a baseline strip in there to be big enough so they can see, hey, this is what I typically would have done. And this is the rest of the field are going to put in some sort of practice. And so the reason I did that was to actually take advantage of some of these tools. And if this IAMP project gets going again, we might do something very similar, encourage growers to do something similar with these tools. I'm going to do today a demonstration of a cover crop study that was a part of the Pandas project. It was a Western SARE project that Cammy's have been part of and Doug's a part of. And Sabode, who I see was online, is part of, and Sanford was there, and looking at a cover crop decision support tool. So it's kind of what we're, well, just some of the tools. So we just realized if you've been a part of agriculture right now, there's a lot of just really innovative work that's going on. You know, you hear the regenerative agriculture term thrown around everywhere. There's a lot of sorts of bioamendments. There's people doing grazing of cover crops, even up on the Palouse. You hear a lot of talk of reduce synthetic fertilizers, trying to improve the soil. Soil health is a really important thing, and we want to just and implement these. And so there's a lot of things to try, and really want to evaluate. So there's really a big need to evaluate whether these products work or this whatever you do does work. And so this has been this push is can we do on-farm experiments? You know, a grower wants to know really specifically, in my soil, does this practice, is it going to work? In my climate, you know, it may work, you know, at the University Research Extension Center, but does it work in my climate? And how long before I can expect to see any soil or improvement in my crop? Or maybe I did something 10 years ago. Have I seen any soil improvement? Has anything happened? Or, you know, what happens when that drought year comes or that flood year comes? How did my crop respond? You want to understand these questions. Those are some of the questions that before I adopt something. That's what I want to know about, in particular for my soil. And sometimes we have some really innovative ideas that the university hasn't even evaluated. And a lot of times as the university is going to evaluate, something's going to take 5 years for it to publish. And really do a really detailed, you know, statistically significant analysis, and maybe you don't want to wait for that long. But you still want to do some evaluation of a new practice. And so there's all sorts of ways people do on-farm experiments that by themselves. Sometimes they'll just do a simple pilot study, just take part of a field. I'm just going to throw this new management out, or I'm going to do composting for the first time, or I'm going to apply biochar or whatever. And you really just want to know if it's a train wreck or not. I mean, does it work or not? And so you're just throwing something out. So that might be a simple pilot study, a really simple thing you can do. You can do a little more elaborate, do a longer plot. I'm going to do a long plot across the whole field, and I really want to see how this practice, and maybe it's a reduced nitrogen rate, affects crop response. And maybe I know there's some different soil types. Maybe I know it's a south slope, a north slope. And so so maybe it's a simple, just a long plot you put in, just using your own equipment to do this. Of course, you can get more complex as you go, more of a replicated study, or you're going to have multiple trials and multiple reps. This is getting more like a university level project, but maybe that's something you want to look at, a nitrogen rate study. How about a biochar application rate study or a compost rate study where I have multiple rates you want to evaluate? And so that could get a little bit more elaborate. Or I think some farmers, and I know this is their just trial field, and they just dump whatever is, and they've done all sorts of things in this field, and I always just try things on this field, and so it's maybe just the entire field as a test plot. And so actually I was just going through and just, what does it mean? What do it mean to do an on-farm experiment? And actually there was a extension publication came out from OSU, I see in 2023, that did a pretty good job of actually talking about how to set up an on-farm experiment. They don't really get into the remote sensing part of it, but I kind of gleaned a little bit. This is a good rules of thumb, keep it simple. If you just want to look at nitrogen or fertilizer, don't vary your phosphorus, your sulfur, and everything else across these rates. You do multiple factors. Keep it simple, one factor. Include a control strip. And that's probably a really important thing is, keep a strip in there that you keep the same so you can compare a relative difference, especially if you want to see, hey, this year it worked. Was it just because the weather was good? If you didn't have a control strip and know what you normally would do, if you just did the whole field, then you'd never know how to compare it. And oftentimes you want to select a uniform part of the field, the one that we don't have a lot of soil variability. All I want to see is the difference in that treatment. And so knowing where to put that in is good to think about. Or you really want to actually do replicates, and you want to actually evaluate changes. And this is part of the OSU study. They actually did some statistical analysis, and they said, and this is particular for crop yield monitors, if you want, they recommend 4 replicates, a quarter mile long, in a fairly uniform field to detect a 4 bushel per acre change or an 8% differences in yield between treatments 80% of the time. So that's what they're kind of recommending is, well, if you really want to get down to that 8% difference and you have crop yield monitor, then that would be something you could do. So let's, think about. Longer practices, longer plots is a way to do it. The width of the plots, oftentimes, obviously, if you're using a combine to do that, it should be greater than the width of the combine. And you may want to have a little buffer so it's not some overlap part of the plot. But, if you've done crop yield monitors, oftentimes you don't even have one, so that's out. Or you just got one. How do I evaluate what happened in the past if I just got one? And if you have a crop yield monitor, sell them fully calibrated. It takes a while to actually get to calibration. And even if you have a plot and it's fairly short, there's lag time between when the combine starts into a plot and when you actually get to full maximum yield. So there's some lag time issues that could happen. You could get a weigh wagon out there separated out, but that takes some time. And so usually, it's the time issue. I don't have much time during growing season. There's no time during harvest. I don't have time to do the crop and soil samples. And so that's what makes these on-farm experiments challenging to a typical grower. So that's what I want to kind of impress upon you guys is there's remote sensing tools out there. There's satellite imagery that's available, and you guys have probably all heard of satellite imagery and maybe have used it to some extent. But I want to encourage you guys to at this point in time that we've got to the point where we actually have satellite imagery really at high frequency. It's, oftentimes satellites are being twice a day even. They're high resolution. There's a long history. So oftentimes remote sensing, you hear people talk about, oh, I can make zones then. I'll just take an image. But really the important thing is you want to know how persistent a pattern is. So a one-time evaluation in your field, well, that might be interesting for that one time. And those zones tend to be more persistent. But having imagery going back multiple years, 10 years, 15 years. Let's see if that same pattern holds up. So temporal stability of patterns is something you can really start doing quite a bit with satellite imagery. And so this is the ability to go back in time. And like I'll show here, is there's many free options available that are really pretty easy to use. And yeah, the relative difference in some of the responses you see are really correlate pretty well with the relative difference in crop response. And particularly we see for up here in the Palouse with cereals is the correlation between some of these indexes and the nitrogen content in the grain. So if you've seen that, you've probably heard of NDVI and this understanding of with satellite imagery, we're looking at reflectance of light off of a crop, and particularly the near infrared bands and the red bands are useful at detecting stress and chlorophyll. They also are good to detect total biomass. So the bigger the crop, the more this NDVI will go up. So it's really biomass and chlorophyll it's sensing. So you can start, well, that's great because that correlates well with what my crops do. And up on the Palouse, we've Troy Magnus, a study that we were part of a while back, just plotted one of the indexes, this NDRE, which is very similar to NDVI, versus total above ground nitrogen. And you can see a pretty good correlation across the Palouse in different crops. And you can see, you know, the idea behind NDRE, NDVI is here's point A and point B. They look pretty similar to the eye. But if you actually look at the index, it's quite different. One's up by 0.55, one's down here at 0.2. And that is a difference of between 50 kilograms per hectare and 180 kilograms per hectare in nitrogen. So that nitrogen removal is a huge difference, even though it looks about the same that's going on here. And farmers like this up in the Palouse is like, well, I can actually divide that nitrogen, if I can map this out, the nitrogen is removed by the crop versus how much I apply. And this is an index. I can just use this to look at efficiencies. How efficient am I with the fertilizer I use? Interesting, this picture here, this is not something you could see with a naked eye, but we showed this to our grower and he's like, oh boy, that was our old field boundary. I haven't had a field boundary there in 10 years. And you can actually see these linear features coming up. And so some of the satellite imagery, even just to detect spatial variability across a field, is pretty enlightening. So what are the images? Just so you know, kind of idea of what's available. Landsat imagery, which is probably you guys heard of before. It started way back in the 1980s. I mean, they have images go way back in time. Typically, those satellites go every 16 days, but if you have 2 satellites going, it'll give you images every 8 days. Spatial units are 98 feet or 30-meter resolution, so the pixel size is fairly coarse compared to Sentinel. Sentinel is another satellite that gives you 10-meter resolution, 33-feet resolution, and you can get that images every 2 to 5 days. And so this is getting actually pretty good management scale. That's available going back to 2017, also free. Planet is a commercial option. That's 3-meter resolution or 10 feet resolution. And you can give multiple satellite image passes in a day. I can actually see center pivot lines and actually see if the center pivot's moving because I can just look from the 2 images in a single day. So you're getting a pretty high resolution at this point. So those are available. And if you look at the spatial resolution of these, obviously this is a game camera. This is giving you sub-inch resolution. Here's what they used to have rapid eye. This is a 5-meter resolution or 16-foot resolution. You start seeing, you know, you can start seeing the pixels kind of come out. So if you're looking at changes less than 16 feet, you're not going to see it. Here's Sentinel. This is the 10-meter or 33-foot resolution. So you can still see quite a bit of the variability. You go up to Landsat, now it's getting a little more difficult to see spatial variability in the field. But both these lower 2 are free. This one actually you can still get available, some of the older ones, and the Planet would be even between these 2. So when you start thinking of plot width and you're saying, okay, I want to take advantage of those, one thing you want to do is if you're thinking about plot width, the plot width should be, I'm recommending, is twice the size of the resolution imagery. So if you're going to use satellite image like Sentinel to detect what a crop is doing, and you don't want to avoid having a mixed pixel, so the plot width is less than the width of the image. You know, if you actually went to 66-foot width test plots, then you'll guarantee that you have at least 1 pixel across the whole length of that strip that's not mixed. So that's one thing to kind of think about what your imagery you're going to do. Okay, so we're going to talk about 3 of these tools, and I already asked you about these. And here's some QR codes if you wanted to, and the hyperlink. So even if you put in Climate Engine, Climate Toolbox, Cropscape, all of these 3 are freely available. The Climate Engines that we're going to show you is they're going to show how to access all this satellite imagery, the Landsat, the Sentinel, and I'll show you how to put points. So we can actually delineate field boundaries and actually access historically. We can have recent imagery. Climate Toolbox is the one, the weather. So all you guys are talking about all the weather anomalies. Check this out. And really, there's some really cool tools to actually even look at the entire state, or even look like a point in the state, or even a field within the state of what the weather's like. I mean, you can look at average precip, average temperature, minimum temperatures, the variability from a 30-year average. So really cool website. Cropscape is the one you can actually look at crop type going back in time. So if you want to know, what on this field, what has been the crop rotation, and we can go back to 2006. So you can almost go back, 20 years and identify crop type, and actually it's pretty darn good. I found they can distinguish between peas and lentils, and barley and spring wheat. So it's actually a really great way to get a crop rotation going back in time. So I want to stop with Cropscape. So Cropscape has been put out by NAS. You can just put it in here, and you'll open up a window like this. You see the entire state. On the left is years. It's a radio button. Just click it, and you go in and actually highlight the years. And you can zoom in on wherever you want. And so I just zoomed in on, here's just outside of Moscow. Here's from 2024. Here's last year. Here's some fields. The dark brown is winter wheat. This is spring wheat. This is canola. This is barley. This is chickpeas. So you can see exactly what the crop type's in. So really cool tool. So I'm examining that. The next one is Climate Toolbox. This is the one I talked about. This is all the weather one. And so if you click on this, and I might show you even live in a little bit, they have all sorts of tools. Click on Climate Mapper. This is a really great way to talk about those anomalies and map out where we are this year across the state or across the United States on temperature and precip anomalies. Are we below average? Are we above? What's the last 7 days like? What it's been like since October? So we'll get into those. I think, so Climate Mapper is one I really look at. I'm going to show you here is this historical seasonal progression. So if you want to know where we are compared to last year or previous years or a 30-year average in terms of precip, these are the 2 tools I use a lot. Here's even a drought. So the last 30 days of April, we hardly had much precip up here. If you want to say, is it a 30-day drought? Are we in a 5-year drought or in a 1-year drought? Depends on what the time frame. These will actually go back and analyze it, and you can get an idea of what the drought is. There's all sorts of tools in here. So I encourage you to just go in there, explore, click on these tools, very easy. They all will let you navigate to a point. Here's just the historical tracker for Moscow. And this was as of, I think I did this last Friday, so it doesn't get the more recent rains that are in here. But here's the dark black line is the typical average, 1980 to 2018, typical precip. This is cumulative precip with time starting October 1st. And the red is what we had this year. And so we can kind of see, and it's really been a kind of a typical year, a little higher and then a lower, a little higher and a little lower. The gray lines in here are representing the 30 to 70% range around the mean. You can see in April, though, we did cut off. We actually, flattened for a while. Thankful in the last few days, we've been getting some rain. The big drought in Moscow, if everybody remembers, recent drought is the 2021 drought. In this case, that's what the red line is representing what happened in 2021. In 2021, we have above normal precip, came to about mid-March, early April, and then just shut off. It completely shut off, it flatlined. So we are above that. It was looking a little scary. I think the last few rains is is more encouraging. But I can go across the state. What does Grangeville look like? Grangeville, all right, more or less average, looking pretty good. What does Ritzville look like? Oh boy, if you're in Central Washington, what a great year for precip. You are way above normal, looking good. You're probably pretty happy. Idaho Falls, yeah, we're a little lower. We're a little below. Actually, I just looked it up right before I got on here, and actually the Idaho Falls precip jumped up quite a bit in the last 5 days. Maybe I'll show you that in a little bit. So anyway, Climate Toolbox, really cool tool for tracking everything weather related, climate related going across the state. So on-farm experiments, the climate then the weather ties in, but really this is where we're going to get into the remote sensing and getting the satellite imagery. And so this is the website, Climate Engine. It's another free one. You do have to log in. They'll have a required login. You can use Google or you can create an account to launch this tool. And really, it's a free tool. It accesses Landsat, Sentinel, even MODIS is really big grids, usually for continental scale type of patterns. OpenET, if you're familiar with OpenET, a really great way of tracking evapotranspiration. Climate Engine, you can actually interrogate all that data as well. OpenET is another really great web interface to track evapotranspiration across the state and really good for the irrigators to see what's going on. But that also will get to that. It'll automatically, so some websites let you download satellite imagery, but then you have to come up with the calculate NDVI or NDRE or some of these factors. This already calculates it for you. Not only calculates for you, you can zoom on an area and you can download that TIFF. You like to make your own pictures or put it into a presentation, or you like to put in ArcGIS yourself and interrogate. You can download the gridded maps of that. You can select over a specific data range. I want to know what the satellite imagery is saying in the last week or last month or since October. And so you can average over different life spans. You could just even drop in pins. It's like, just give me the time series from a different point, extract that over a field. You can compare 5 different points and just see how is things going. And in terms of, hey, what growth stage you guys were talking about, what peak stage you're at, if you had NDVI, you can actually track where it is. You can actually see where vegetation growth is happening. What a great tool. Use the satellite imagery to compare Idaho Falls to Pocatello. I don't know, you can compare the different crops. A great tool to actually look at that. And actually will allow you to actually print out the recent weather data as well. And I'm saying it's easy to use. So, and I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to jump out and I'm going to just go live with this, because I think I want to encourage you guys to see how easy it is to use this. Let me go into Climate Engine. Drag my window here. So if you click that link, you got into Climate Engine, you would have had to do a login. I skipped that part. I've already logged in. They give you this welcome video. Actually, Climate Engine, Climate Toolbox, just for history for you guys. Many of you guys may have known John Obatsaglu, who was at University of Idaho for many years, is now down at UC Merced. He's the one that actually started Climate Engine and Climate Toolbox, and now continues at UC Merced to develop these tools. And so if you see something you'd like to see in here, he'd be happy to get feedback as well on what you'd like to see going on. So if you just click in here, you could see there's different options on the left. You can see the spatial map. What you want to do is actually click into remote sensing, just drop down the type of variable. So you can actually get climate. And this is actually, I can even put down precip. What's the precip like? And I can do a range from any date, some start date to end date, and just map it. So, I wasn't going to talk about precip, but that's one way to actually get at the precip data. But I'm going to talk about remote sensing. So I click on remote sensing. And then the data sets then will highlight. If you go to the next data set, you can see all sorts of imagery. There's the Landsat imagery. There's MODIS imagery. There's Verisim imagery, and then there's Sentinel imagery, and there's TOA's top of atmosphere, SR is surface reflectance, and I'll use the surface reflectance option in here. And then the variable, NDVI is right in here. And look at this. Oh, actually, I just talked to Catherine a week ago. Did you put NDRE in here? Sure enough, now NDRE is in here. It was a red edge index. It's very similar to NDVI. I'm going to stick with NDVI at this point, but hey, this is something we actually put in last week, update this tool. And then we can go in and probably the next thing is zoom in where you want to look at imagery. And I could maybe I'll just type in Moscow, Idaho here. I'm going to center this map over Moscow, Idaho, and I'm just going to zoom in. And I'm just going to show, because we don't have a lot of time here, we just pick out a couple fields. Maybe I'll zoom out a little bit. So first thing you could do is okay, just give me the NDVI. What did it look like last year? And oftentimes when I want to look at vegetative growth, I'm going to look at the growing season. In particular, you want to kind of get the crop right before flowering. Oftentimes up here in the Palouse, I'll say, well, just give me the average NDVI starting at June 1st and ending at the end of June. So let's just do the month of June. Let's average what the NDVI looks like for these fields. So I just put a custom date, selected this, and just hit get map layer. And so what it's going to do is just going to get all the imagery that's taken place, and like I say, it could be multiple days that are taking place. There's multiple images, overpasses. They'll actually screen out some of the cloudy days because it's affected by cloud cover. And then here it is. Here's a plotted map. 0 would be a low NDVI, would be like some of bare soil. 0.9, a dark green, is a really healthy crop, and that's probably a high yield. And we can start seeing, even if we zoom in, some of the variability you'd see across a field. You can actually look, field variability from topography drives a lot of this that's going on, and I can just map it out. And then you can just download it. Hey, I just want to download the image. I can download the PDF, or I can select a region and download as a TIFF image if you like that. The other thing that, this is just spatially, but I really like to get to the data. Let's just look at what it looks like at a couple of points. This is when you get to make graph. So if you just click the make graph up here in the upper left, you can actually put points. It's like, I want to compare this point, and I can add another region. I may put another point, compare this point. And sometimes points is not as good as, maybe let's get an average. Let's do it for a field. So actually identify this tool, and I can maybe just select this field. Give me an average NDVI for this field. And I'm going to compare it to this field over here. And I can select either a point or a polygon. I'm going to select this. Maybe I'll bypass, looks like a little gully there. I'm just doing it quick. And maybe I'll do one more. Let's find one more. I'm going to come over here to this field. And you could use the cropscape to determine what field crop types they are. At this point, it doesn't say specifically, but like say, you can combine these tools and get your crop type. Once I got that, now I might even go with the whole growing season now. I'm going to start back in April because this is going to give you all the satellite passes. And I'm going to end by the end of the growing season. I'm going to end it in October 1st. And this is from last year. And just get the time series. So this might be something you want to compare different points on the field. You want to compare two different fields. So maybe they're both planted a winter wheat. Maybe there's a trial in here. You used to say, hey, I plot, this is where my on-farm trial is. I want to put a polygon around that baseline. This is my control strip. This is my other strip. And so now this is showing from essentially April 1st to October 1st, the vegetative index. So if, like say, if it's 0.9, it's a pretty good crop. If you saw winter wheat at 0.9, that's a pretty good, healthy crop. If I looked at this difference here from this orange to the blue, you may know as a farmer, if I have a really good growth in April 1st, that's winter wheat. So there's no doubt in my mind, this was winter wheat and it died out. This looks like spring wheat. This might even be chickpea. I might have got the 3 major crops in the region that's showing up. So you can see the growth, how it's lagged. If it's a cold year, maybe it's starting out colder. Maybe it's coming up. Oftentimes I'll look at the peak it gets to, or even right before the peak, this relative difference right in June. This is a significant difference in the biomass. So then you could say, oh, I just want to download this. I want to put it into Excel. You can download this Excel sheet or CSV. You can put it and save it and make a comparison. If you want to know, oh, what was the blue? Going back to the map, the blue was this field, the green's that field, the orange, and I can still go back to the figure. Oh, that's right. Okay, those are the fields. So that's a really simple and easy way to look at this data set. Now I want to go back to my talk and continue on. I'll show you how we did this, use this tool on a specific field trial. So this is part of the Pandas project. So now I'm showing you, essentially, this is the NDVI. And what I did was actually change the legend. It was actually going from light green to dark green. Actually, there's another option. You drop down, you can make it go to red to dark green. it just, for me, it gives you more contrast, helps you see a little bit more of the differences. So what you could do, right, the first thing I said about a field trial is you want to have a nice uniform crop, or actually you want a uniform part of your field. There's not a lot of variability. So I could go back in time and actually use the NDVI and actually see, is the NDVI different in these fields? I know when I know it's all planted the same field. So you can do a historic analysis, what it is. In this case, I'm just showing you from so May 7th, 2023 to May 31st. This is the average NDVI for that time period. It's about that time, and beginning of May, we actually planted, in May, we planted a cover crop. And what you can tell, this red is showing, this is actually, it is a fallow field. The red is showing very little growth. This dark green is showing this is probably a winter wheat field. This is in the middle range. This is probably a spring wheat field. It's out, this is more out toward dusty area of central Washington. So it's a drier area. We have fallow that we're using. So that's where we at. And actually, part of the project, we want to do a field trial. We're looking at cover crop termination dates. And so when you put a cover crop, if you terminate on June 1st, like RMA wants you to terminate a crop on June 1st in order to continue to get crop insurance for winter wheat in the next year, we're going to terminate on June 1st. We thought that was too early. We're going to terminate another crop, part of this cover crop, on June 30th. We'll terminate another one on middle of July 15th. And then what we're going to do is put these cover crops in, show how they grow, terminate them at the different rates. And we're in a dry area, and we're going to grow winter wheat the next year in the entire field. And we're going to see if those cover crops that went all the way to termination in August actually have more. Did they affect the winter wheat yield? Are we drawing all the water out? And that's the scare. If you don't have fallow, then you might draw the water out. So that was kind of the motivation around the plots. So we put these plots in, and like say for Climate Engine, you can even drop 2 points, and I can put points in the business usual, the fallow, the first termination, the second and third termination date. So that's how it was kind of set up. The plots themselves were 54 feet by 180. The grower themselves put the plots in. His drill went in 54-foot increments, or multiples of that. I would have liked to see with Sentinel imagery up to 66, so it's a little bit narrower than maybe ideal, but you'll see it actually does a pretty decent job even at 54 feet. This is kind of what the plot looked like. Here's a fallow field. So it's a fallow field this in 2023, and then we're going to follow it up with winter wheat. And so we had 3 termination dates. This is actually taken after the first termination. So this section was terminated. The next section would be terminated in the end of June, and the third would be terminated in the middle of July. This one, we actually did different cover crop mixtures. That's why it looks like a little different. There's some canola in there. So let's look at these plots before we even did anything. So up until, so this is from 2019 to 2022, what do these plots look like? Even before, these are always planted the same crop. If all these lines, the green represents a different point, and the blue and the orange, if these are on top of each other, then it's a very uniform field. You probably expect the same crop response. So that looks pretty close. This is maybe a little bit of variability. The 2022 is really quite on top of each other. So that would convince me that's pretty good. The one that looks a little strange, and we're trying to figure out, it actually shows up, it was a barley field. I think I got this from the cropland data. I can show what it was. This is canola. That was winter wheat. That was spring barley, and that was spring wheat. This was a drought year, if you know, 2021. And so there were some issues going on, and in the cropland data, it shows 2 different crops were going in there. So anyway, that would be a little bit of a red flag, but if the grower knew this land, then he'd probably be fine with it. So, all right, so that was, now we're going to go further into the growing season. This is June 1st to June 15th. On June 1st, that top layer, this top strip has been sprayed out. So we have fallow, so the red is the lowest. Yeah, okay, so fallow makes sense, fallow. Now I got this strip that's terminated first, this upper one. You can actually see it's a little less. There's a little darker red than these 2 are more yellow, so they're more in the intermediate NDVI. And so you're starting to see some growth. Then we go further into the season. Here's the plot. Now we're getting really pretty good growth in the 2 that haven't been terminated yet. There's some weird, strange features in here. When we looked at it and you talked to the grower, he had some Roundup Ready canola in there, and actually was sprayed it out, but the canola didn't go. So actually another indicator, like, oh wow. So we can actually start seeing differences with whether they got terminated or not. So this was middle of June. So now the second strip is now going to be terminated. And sure enough, we're starting to see, okay, so we're starting to see this die out. And this is with glyphosate. So it took, you know, a week or two to actually some of this vegetation to die out. But we're starting to see that. We go further on. Now it's end of July. Everything's maturing. Everything's getting red. All the crops are senescing. And so that's why everything's dropping. By September, you hardly see any differences. And that's probably because it's just straw out there or fallow, whatever, just surface dirt is what it is. So now let's go into our winter wheat year. So now we're going to follow it up and we're going to see, boy, can we actually see strips, or does the cover crop help the winter wheat? So this is in October. And so now we're actually seeing some green up. We're actually seeing part of the field that was planted winter wheat probably in end of September, early October. We're actually starting to see vegetative growth. And actually this strip is actually showing a little bit more growth than these two. These are redder. So we're actually seeing, that cover crop is really impairing the winter wheat yields. If we move forward into May of the next year, I can still see those. Those are still there. That's not good. We're having some yield drag on the cover crop itself. If we go further into June, I'm still seeing that show up. So there's some sort of, you know, maybe a drag on the crop at that point. Maybe the termination date 1 is actually a little better. If I go further, this was in July. Now everything's kind of dying. I'm not seeing as many differences. But here again, I can go in and drop the points in the same locations there and actually see what it looks like. And so now I'm just adding the 2023. That's the year when the cover crop was planted. And this is all the satellite imagery for the winter wheat the following year. And I'll just zoom in a little bit here on this, and we can actually see what's going on. So the blue line is representing fallow. And so remember, this is our cover crop year. So we're going in the spring. Now it's June. Cover crop, since the NDVI is representing vegetative growth, there's no vegetative growth. There's nothing going on. Perfect. That's what we thought would happen. We had a June 1st termination. So the crop started to grow. We started seeing greening, but the June 1st, there's very little biomass, and it terminated. Looks like we got a little bit of volunteer growth going in later on in the season. We can see some greening up. Now we can see terminate date on June 30th. It actually was rising pretty good. And when it got terminated, it took a little while for it to die down, but you can see it's dying down. And there's the one that went all the way to July 15th. So then we can see how it went forward. And actually, we had some biomass data. It's just for your curiosity. So on June 1st, we actually took some biomass. And we're only looking at, I think it was less than 10 grams per square meter at this point of biomass. In the yellow, the second termination date, we got up to 200, a little close, and then the third is up to 375. So we can see there certainly was different amount of cover crop that was produced at those different spots. The winter wheat, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry to cut in, but we are a little bit
that's at the end
at the moment.
Okay.
If you don't mind giving folks at least an opportunity to ask you a question or two.
Sure.
Apologies.
I'll stop it there.
Obviously, there's a heck of a lot of utility here. Does anybody in the audience have any questions for Dr. Brooks while we have him about the functionality of this, the limits, potentially the future persistence of our ability to use these tools? Are you aware of any potential threats due to funding cuts to the maintenance and sustainability of these tools?
For myself, would I hear any cuts or anything? Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like Don's got a question for you as well.
Yeah. So Erin, so with this, you could actually go back to fields a few years ago, and through the season, you could determine if it was water stressed at any given point in time.
So you can determine stress, so you can't tell if it's water or it'd be nutrient or insect or whatever, but you can certainly say that there's stress going on. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
We have been hearing a lot about funding cuts to federal agencies, and I saw the NOAA logo supporting some of these tools. Are you aware at the moment of any issues related to who's going to be maintaining the capabilities, or who's working on the back end? Are they still going to be any idea?
Yeah, so I know some of the climate engine was funded through some of the federal dollars, and yeah, I don't know. I don't know the impact to some of the availability of these images. So it's a good question though. I gotta suspect at some point the manpower or even the ability for satellites, I assume they'll continue to be supported, but you know, where it's a private takes over more private for federal, I don't know. But yeah, great question.
Any other comments or questions from the audience today? Well, I'm very sorry to cut you short, but I
No,
think
it's fine. I was
it
almost done.
highlights the need to do an additional session where we have a little more time and are able to go in depth. And you know, I think this would lend itself very well to a hands-on sort of guided activity where people could be working on their own fields and with I think that we should continue to talk about this, Dr. Brooks, and see if we can be a little more elaborate here. Really appreciate you presenting today. Appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing with us. To let folks know, I have launched a exit poll. If you don't mind filling that out, that'll get us some good feedback, evaluation materials for this session. And let you know that the next Ag Talk Tuesday will be on June 3rd. We're still determining the topic and speakers, so keep it on your calendar and be looking for updates from us about exactly what we're going to be discussing then. I want to thank everybody for their time. Thank you for staying a few minutes over and for your participation today in our Ag Talk Tuesday series. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful day.